Legislators, dignitaries, and friends, good morning and welcome to the 38th Annual Statewide Civic Commemoration of the Holocaust. As you know from the past 5 ceremonies, my name is Mark Zucker, and this is my last year as chair of the Pennsylvania Jewish Coalition. Each year, the Governor's Office and our statewide coalition co-sponsor this event. We are particularly grateful that this year Pennsylvania is continuing this tradition of commemorating the victims and survivors and sharing the lessons of the Holocaust in person for the first time since 2019. We are so grateful for the legislature's unwavering support of this Holocaust Remembrance Program and for the unanimous passage of Act 70 back in 2014, calling for educators to teach their students about genocide and human rights violations in general and the Holocaust in particular. At last count, over 95% of the Pennsylvania public charter and technical schools are teaching their students these important lessons with the resources and training necessary to navigate such sensitive topics. Our legislators likewise supported Act 83 of 2019, which creates a grant program to help keep some of our nonprofit facilities more secure. And many of you have joined with us to advocate for stronger hate crime legislation and for the teaching of cultural competency. Today, we join together once again to remember those lost in the world's most horrific genocide, to celebrate the strength of the human spirit, and to commit to work together to build a compassionate society that celebrates diversity and deplores acts of anti-Semitism and hatred. As has become so evident with the appalling news of atrocities in Ukraine, it is essential that we speak out against those who preach evil and that we pledge to fight the corrosive effect of hatred. This is critical because unless our government leaders join with us to fight hatred and oppression, our own security and the security of all Pennsylvanians will be jeopardized. And right here in Pennsylvania, these goals are as timely as ever. The past several years have been marked with an increase of ethnic, racial, and religious hatred, including actions aimed at the Asian American community, the Black community, and yes, the Jewish community, among many others. We've witnessed a growing white supremacy movement that threatens to destabilize our Commonwealth and our country. And we've witnessed violence and lawlessness. As we focus today on the importance of remembering and educating our society about the lessons of the Holocaust, the relevance of these lessons has never been more clear. We're grateful to share today's ceremony with survivors of the Holocaust, as well as their children and grandchildren, and even some great-grandchildren. Though sadly declining in number due to the passage of time, these survivors are a living testimonial to the strength of the human spirit. At the same time, as sundown this evening begins the holiday known as Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, we honor the memory of more than 6 million Jewish victims and hundreds of thousands of other victims from that dark period of history, and resolve to ensure that such tragedy never occurs again. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi Ariana Koptauber, appointed in 2020 to lead the Congregation of Temple Beth El, right here in Harrisburg. Rabbi Koptauber's her grandmother, Linda Marshak, a Holocaust survivor, will be speaking later in the program. But first, let's hear welcoming remarks from Rabbi Koptauber. Rabbi?
Hi, my name is Rabbi Ariana Koptauber, and as you heard, I'm the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. In Judaism, we have a concept called pikuach nefesh, saving a life. Though Judaism has 613 commandments, even laws of paramount importance, like keeping the Sabbath or desecrating God's name, can be superseded by one thing, and that is saving a life. One may violate any other Jewish law for the sake of preserving life. The sanctity of life is a constant theme in Judaism. In the book of Genesis, we learn that every form of life was created by God and that every human being was created in the image of God. To harm or destroy a human being, then, is to harm or to destroy God. The rabbis say that to destroy one life is to destroy an entire world. It is an unfathomable atrocity, then, when life is destroyed on a mass scale. During World War II, which was instigated by Nazi Germany, an estimated 40 to 50 million people were killed. That's 50 million images of the divine. Of those, 11 million were murdered by the Nazis in concentration camps and gas chambers. Disabled people, LGBTQ people, people of color, political dissidents. That's 11 million worlds destroyed. And of those 11 million, 6 million were Jews, representing 2/3 of the Jews in Europe at the time, and almost half of the total Jewish population. The life that was wiped out was not just breath and blood. It was a thriving Yiddish culture, an inspired spiritual tradition, a deep religious heritage. Generations of scholars, leaders, artists, innovators were wiped out. Entire Jewish political and religious movements disappeared. But what I want to say today is that while these lives were forever lost, life itself was not. Jewish life thrives today, brimming with scholars, leaders, artists, innovators, movements political and religious, diverse in every way. The German Jew, Dr. Emil Fackenheim, wrote that Jews must add a 614th commandment to our 613, and that is to continue to live as Jews. So I ask the esteemed group gathered here today on Holocaust Remembrance Day, not only to remember Jewish death, but to support Jewish life, to give legal and financial support to Jewish initiatives, to combat anti-Semitism that threatens living Jews, to participate in Jewish celebrations, and to support refugees in memory of the Jewish refugees that came here, like my grandmother, as the Jewish community in Harrisburg has been doing. In this way, we can truly honor the memories of those lost, respect God's will, and ensure that this never happens again. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rabbi Kaptauber. We're honored to introduce our next guest, Governor Tom Wolf. Just before the pandemic began, representatives of the PJC were lucky enough to accompany Governor Wolf on visits to various sites and meetings with dignitaries during his personal family trip to Israel. Governor, we are so grateful to be back with you in person, having seen you on a Zoom screen for the past 2 years, to commemorate this solemn day and commend you for your leadership and that of your administration in trying so hard to keep us safe through the pandemic and in strengthening the security of our religious and communal buildings and rooting out the seeds of hatred in our Commonwealth. Governor?
Speaker Cutler, did you hear the nice things he said about me? Thank you. This is good. It is really good. Thank you very much, Mark, for that introduction. This is indeed a very solemn day, but it's an honor to be here for me. It's a day when we remember all of those we lost to the horrors of the Holocaust. The Holocaust was clearly a monstrous, horrific period in our history. An immense evil perpetrated not by an extraordinary monster, not simply by that, but it was an evil built on a broader foundation of bias, discrimination, hatred, and bigotry that remains far too common today and all too familiar even these many decades later. Moments of remembrance like this are essential for our Commonwealth, for our world, for all of us. In remembrance, we mourn the lives cut short and those forever changed. In a short span of years, our world was forever changed and forever wounded. In memorial, we honor that heartbreaking, indescribable loss. And we remind ourselves again and again and again that this extraordinary evil cannot happen again. And yet we have to remind ourselves it was the act of ordinary people driven by bigotry and hatred, that was rooted in ignorance. It was exploited by leaders who built support by fanning the flames of that fear and anger. And that is why every one of us shares a responsibility to guard against hate, to speak out against discrimination, and take action to end violence. The actions of ordinary people created an atrocity, and it's only through the actions of ordinary people that we can prevent future atrocity. As the rabbi said, we have to serve the living. Right now is a moment when we are all being called to stand up and speak out against bigotry in our community. There has been an increase in hate crimes in Pennsylvania and across the nation in recent years, including an increase in anti-Semitic propaganda and violence. This is unacceptable. Hate has no place in Pennsylvania, period. The reduction of hate crimes must be a top priority here in Pennsylvania for all of us. In 2022 alone, the Commonwealth has invested more than $9 million to help synagogues and other nonprofit organizations improve their facilities' security and to protect against hate crimes. I have also instructed the Pennsylvania State Police and other members of my administration to join the work that the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission and the Anti-Defamation League are doing to track and to fight hate crimes. But to truly root out bigotry, we need every single Pennsylvanian to join hands to take a stand. We must remember the horrors of the past, but more than that, we must act together to build peace today. By working together every day to reject bigotry and promote peace and acceptance, we actually can stop hatred in its tracks. We can build a better future for our Commonwealth, and we can build a better future for our world. That's what we need to do. Thank you. Mark, now I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Governor Wolf, for your words and actions in support of our community. I'd now like to introduce Brian Cutler, Speaker of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. In 2019, I was honored to meet then House Majority Leader Cutler, as he likewise toured significant facilities and sites on an educational trip to Israel. Speaker Cutler was first elected to the Pennsylvania House of Representatives in 2006, representing the 100th Legislative District in Southern Lancaster County, and served for 4 years as Majority Whip. In June 2020, his colleagues elected him as Speaker of the Pennsylvania House. He holds a law degree from Widener and a bachelor's degree from Lebanon Valley College. Please welcome Speaker Cutler.
Thank you very much. Thank you for including me here today, and thank you to everyone who's taking time out of your day to join us and reflect this morning. Over the past 2 years, I think we've all realized a few things that we may have taken for granted previously. Each of us made sacrifices to protect our vulnerable loved ones, changed many of our daily habits to try and protect anyone in our community or our sphere of family and friends. Looking back now, I think we have a different appreciation for some of the smaller things. Things like seeing our children go to school, coming to a beautiful building like our state capitol, gathering with our loved ones during holidays and special occasions, or in a room just like this today. Sadly, as we enjoy these simple pleasures once again, we can't help but think about millions of the Ukrainians who today are making their own enormous sacrifices to try and keep their families together. We are blessed to be here today. We're blessed to have this opportunity and not to be forced to face the situations and decisions like those in the Ukraine are currently making. However, it is a chilling reminder of what millions went through during the Holocaust, as the governor previously outlined in some of the news that we've seen, as well as the rabbi. As Pennsylvanians, each of us calls the same Commonwealth home, and an assault on our way of life on any of us is an assault on all of us, even if that assault is happening across the world. That is why days like today are so very important. Moments that define history continue to impact how the world operates today. It does not matter what your religion is or what values you hold closest to your heart. The most basic right we all share is the right to life. And that was taken away from millions of people through no fault of their own. We owe it to those whose lives were so unfairly cut short, and to the families who faced unimaginable brutality to remember and recognize what happened. We can keep their spirits alive in how we live and how we treat one another. Each of us has far more in common than any of the things that makes us different. And those differences are worth celebrating, not eliminating. May we always remember the victims, and may we live our lives to fight back against history ever repeating itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Cutler. I'm Judith Cranus. I'm the chair of the Pennsylvania Jewish Civic Commemoration Committee on the Holocaust. And it is my honor to introduce Representative Dan Frankel. Representative Frankel currently serves the 23rd Legislative District, that includes Allegheny County, and he is the Democratic chairman of the House Health Committee. He is a former chairman of the Pennsylvania Jewish Coalition, and he has been an integral partner in advancing our mission as an organization. Please welcome Representative Frankel.
Thank you, Judith. It's an honor to be here, as I have in past years, and to be back with everybody in person. And I want to thank the Pennsylvania Jewish Coalition, Mark Zucker, Hank Butler, board members for putting this together, and to thank our governor for continuing this tradition, which I think is enormously important, and to make this space available and to participate in this event. And also to the survivors' families. And, you know, when I first came to these events going back 20 years ago, we actually had many actual survivors here. And sadly, over the years, we've seen many pass away, and it's great to have their family members here, you know, as the children of survivors. My wife is a child of a survivor, and I know how important that role is to be able to continue to provide that message, to provide that history, to give that experience in perpetuity. Today, we convene to acknowledge the horrors of the Holocaust and a staggering loss of life. Pennsylvania has always been profoundly connected to the Holocaust through its residents, survivors, heroes, teachers, who educate new generations on the evils that took the lives of 6 million Jews and others 8 decades ago. We remain connected to the Holocaust through annual events like the Days of Remembrance. And we remain connected through those physical markers throughout the Commonwealth that ground us by giving us a space dedicated to remembrance. The Philadelphia Holocaust Memorial Plaza, the Holocaust Memorial for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania right here in Harrisburg, the Holocaust Memorial sculpture in the York Jewish community. I know my colleague Mark Gillen has also put together a museum in Reading as well. And to all those and many other colleagues who are here today, we're grateful for your presence. And eventually, a new space in Pittsburgh that will honor Jewish victims of anti-Semitism particularly from the attack on the 3 synagogues in the Tree of Life building. That building will honor the 11 Jewish residents we lost, provide education, and promote understanding as part of the bigger project of healing our heartbroken community. Memorials matter. They honor. They provide contemplation. They command our attention and demand that we remember. And so it is with profound pain and regret that I think this year about the damage sustained by the Yar Memorial in Kyiv, Ukraine. On March 1st, that memorial site was hit by a Russian missile in a strike against the people of Ukraine. Some of us here may not know the story of Yar. In September of 1941, the Nazis forced all the Jews of Kyiv into the Yar ravine, where they were mowed down by German machine guns. More than 33,000 Jewish residents of Kyiv were massacred in just 3 days. It was likely the largest killing of Jews at one time in one moment during the Holocaust. For decades, the site of that attack bore little sign of the genocide that occurred there. But over the last 20 years, a community of people gathered public and private support and created a substantial memorial and museum at Yar, telling the story of the Jews who were killed there. 2 weeks after the memorial took rocket fire, the Jewish community announced that their eventual rebuilding efforts will incorporate that damage to ensure that it too would be remembered as part of the story of Yar. The attack on my community in Pittsburgh was nothing like Yar, and the memorial that dedicated survivors and family members will build at the Tree of Life will likely bear no resemblance to the now damaged memorial at Kyiv. But there is something important that we can learn from that site nearly 5,000 miles away. As we build memorials to victims of past atrocities, we must also confront the threats of today. Attacks on people because of who they are, how they worship, or who they love are increasing at an alarming rate all over the world. Pennsylvania continues year after year to essentially lead our nation in the proliferation of hate groups. No one building will fix that, no matter how beautiful the memorial. No event will fix that, no matter how meaningful the speeches. We are going to have to meet hate where it is, time after time, with our laws, with our support for targeted groups, with funding, with education, and yes, with memorials to the millions of victims of hate-based violence at home and abroad. I want to personally thank those of you in the room who have made the funding and support for the Tree of Life Memorial possible. Governor Wolf, you recognize from the beginning the needs of our traumatized community and the urgency of those needs. As that project develops, I hope all of you will come visit, and we can continue to work together to make a safer, more tolerant Commonwealth. On this Yom HaShoah, may we keep the memories of those who we have lost in history and today in our hearts, and may these memories give us the clarity and the courage to do what is right. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Franco. As the representative noted, in past ceremonies, it was our tradition to have Holocaust survivors light commemorative candles in memory of those who perished in the tragic genocide. But many of those survivors are now of blessed memory. Let us share a moment of silence for those we have lost who are here in this room with us at some time. Sonia Glick, Frida Lederer, Sam Rosen, Yolanda Rosenstein, Bluma Shapiro, Sam Sharon, Sandy Sternberg. Thank you. As time moves on, it is the survivors' children and grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren, who carry on their individual legacies by sharing stories and educating future generations. We now recognize the following people and ask them to please rise and remain standing for a moment. We have Holocaust survivor with us, Linda Marshak, and her granddaughter, only if you can stand, only if it's easy for you, please, and her granddaughter, Rabbi Ariana Kaptaber. We have Lillian Rappaport and her daughter, Jenna Rappaport. They stand in memory of Jacob and Genia Weinstock of Harrisburg. We have Raymond Rosen and Jesse Rosen Harvey, who join us in memory of San and Olga Sunyog Rosen of Scranton, and the Honorable Mark Schlossberg in memory of Harry and Helen Hertzberg of Brooklyn, New York. Thank you. Please be seated. I would now like to call survivor Linda Marshak, who was born in Ostrog, Poland on the eve of World War II, if she'll come to the podium. And as we noted before, Linda is the grandmother of the rabbi who gave our opening address. Please come share a few words.
Thank you so much. Hello. My name is Linda Marshak, and I'm a Holocaust survivor. I was born in Ostrog, Poland, in what is now Ukraine, to a large and close-knit Jewish family. When the Nazis invaded Poland, they came to my town in 1941, rounded up the Jews, including my brother Fima, who was 18, and my sister Lala, who was 16. They brought them into the forest along with thousands of other youths, where they were all shot and buried in a ditch. My mother and I were put in the ghetto, but we managed to escape. I was 3 years old then. We were then at the mercy of Polish Gentiles, many of whom turned us away, knowing that their lives were in danger if they hit us. But a few righteous people took us in, including one farmer and his family. One day we were nearly found, narrowly escaping by hiding, after which the farmer asked us to leave. We then spent several years living in the forest with a group of partisans who took us in. We survived that way with little food, extreme cold, often encountering violence and fleeing for our lives for several years. In 1945, when the Allies liberated Poland, we were taken to a displaced persons camp in Italy. There, I attended school for the first time at the age of 7, taught by Jewish volunteers in the camp. Ultimately, we were able to immigrate to the United States and settled in Brooklyn, where I attended a Jewish day school, and my mother became a nurse. Today, anti-Semitism is on the rise again. From the marchers in Charlottesville to graffitied swastikas on synagogues, including right here in Harrisburg. Jews are made to feel in danger again. Yet I'm given hope by the fact that I have a thriving Jewish family, including my granddaughter, Rabbi Kaptauber, and one great-grandson. I hope they will live in a world in which they can feel safe as Jews. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your personal story. And I think it speaks very much to what we heard in the beginning of our program about the resilience of the human spirit and the will to live on and to make a world that is kind to everyone. Thank you. We're now going to hear from Representative Mike Schlossberg. He's from the 132nd District, representing Allentown, and he will speak on what it means to be a third-generation survivor.
Thank you all very much. My name is Mike Schlossberg. I am Bert and Rose Schlossberg's son, Brenna Schlossberg's husband, and Oren and Ayla Schlossberg's dad. I'm also the grandson of Harry and Helen Herzberg. Grandpa Harry was a Polish citizen when the Nazis came. He spent 5.5 years at Auschwitz, where he lost his whole family. Grandma Helen was Romanian. Her time was shorter, but no less traumatizing, and she spent 2 years in 3 different camps. My grandparents actually met in a refugee camp when the Allies came. I owe my existence and the existence of my children to the Holocaust. This is a complicated legacy. There are traumas. The physical and psychological scars left by the agony that my grandparents suffered weighed on them, as it weighs on my mom, as it weighs on me. Their stories of pain and suffering are clearly multiplied among the ages. Let me be candid. This upbringing gave my Judaism a defensive note. You were Jewish not just for religious and cultural reasons, but because someone once tried to exterminate us. You responded to Hitler's failed machinations by celebrating your faith, but also by holding to it very deeply. This form of religion was one that was often laced with suffering. It infused my religious upbringing with an undercurrent of sadness and a near constant looking over your shoulder. Given the massive upsurge in white supremacy, racist rhetoric, and violent attacks on Jews, it is clear that our struggles are far from over. What I'd also note is this: how you structure those burdens in your life, how you assimilate them into your personality, is key to doing more than just surviving. It is key to thriving, to finding joy, and to passing that joy on to the next generation. I've suffered from some form of depression or anxiety disorders for most of my life, and there were moments where this family trauma absolutely reared its head in my personal battles. At my lowest, I would berate myself. My grandfather could survive 5.5 years at Auschwitz, but I couldn't go to 8th grade homeroom without shaking like a leaf. At other points, at the better moments, I used my family history to support my psyche. My grandfather survived 5.5 years of Auschwitz. My grandfather 2 years in 3 different camps. They traveled halfway across the world and had 3 children, one of whom had me. 50% of my DNA is Herzberg. I am the grandson of Holocaust survivors. I have steel in my bones. Like I said, this legacy is a complicated one, but if done right, it can inform who you are. It can be a compelling call to social justice. Never again can't just be a slogan, but a creed and a lifestyle. In a world where my family suffered so deeply, we must end suffering wherever we find it, even at significant personal sacrifice. Civilization may have failed my grandparents, but the modern world must not fail my children or those around them. A legacy is never static. A single interpretation never suffices. There was a time in my life where my family's legacy would have weighed me to the ground. Some time ago, I made a choice, with the help of others, to allow it to infuse me with a sense of purpose, pride, and justice. Yesterday, my children were here, attending a Capitol field trip with the Jewish Day School of the Lehigh Valley. The school is also run by a 3rd-generation survivor. My kids are classmates with fellow 4th-generation ones. Hitler's armies failed. His henchmen failed. But our charge is to ensure that the legacy of the Holocaust is learned. I will pass my family's legacy on to my children. I will make sure that they know that our job is to make the world a better place. And that, fundamentally, is what being a 3rd-generation survivor means. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Schlosser. I agree. That is the meaning, to heal the world. We at the Pennsylvania Jewish Coalition are very grateful that the children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors will continue to share the lessons from the survivors who are no longer with us. And that brings us to our interfaith message. And it is my honor to introduce our next speaker, Reverend Ronald Gaynor. He is Bishop of the Harrisburg Diocese of the Catholic Church. Originally, he's from Pottsville. He was ordained in Allentown in 1973, having earned a Master of Divinity degree from St. Charles Borromeo Seminary in Montgomery County. He then served as bishop in the Diocese of Lexington, Kentucky, and was installed as the 11th Bishop of Harrisburg in 2014. Please welcome Bishop Gaynor.
Thank you, Judith, and I thank the Pennsylvania Jewish Coalition for the invitation to speak this morning. The extermination of millions of Jews, people of various nationalities and religious faiths, this unspeakable cruelty must never be repeated. It must never be forgotten, so that we can build a future in which human dignity is never trampled again. These are the words of Pope Francis, spoken earlier this year on the horrors of the Holocaust and why it is our duty to ensure that what happened then will never be forgotten and never be repeated in future generations. 6 million Jews were murdered. As Rabbi reminded us, 2/3 of the continent's Jewish population. Entire families devastated, men, women, and children tortured and exterminated. Such evil is almost unfathomable to imagine, except for the fact that these horrific events did happen. What we commemorate today gives shocking evidence that evil did and still does exist. It is incumbent upon all of us, people of all faiths, to never stop teaching of these horrors. It is said that if you ignore history, then you are doomed to repeat it. May God bless our Jewish brothers and sisters who know suffering all too well. They are a people who have suffered for millennia through famines and cruelty and war. They have been unjustly targeted, and they have suffered. Yet they do not suffer alone. God saw that suffering, and we face a world that is turning away from faith in God, a world consumed with achieving pleasures for oneself at the expense of seeking the good of others. War, famine, violence, and suffering are all on the rise, not only in some distant parts of the world, Ukraine, but in our own neighborhoods. Now is the time for all people of faith, from all faith traditions, to unite in a battle against good versus evil. Families and educators must work together to teach our younger generations the horrors of the past so that humanity has no license to allow evil to commit those atrocities again. We must encourage and empower our families to raise the new generations to be faithful. We must teach the young to value their own dignity in order to respect the dignity of others. They must be taught to turn away from hatred and seek reconciliation. Future generations must be taught the consequences of choosing evil, and that to choose silence in the face of evil is to embrace evil. God has blessed us with the capacity to learn from the past, to learn from the unspeakable iniquities of the Shoah. But with that blessing comes responsibility. To know the past is not enough. To know the path laid out for us by God is not enough. We must choose to work together, all of us, to take direct action as communities of faith to oppose evil in its every expression and ensure that the horrors of the Holocaust that we remember today never can recur. Catholics of the Diocese of Harrisburg join with our fellow citizens of the Commonwealth and all people of goodwill everywhere in praying and working for a world in which human life and human rights are respected and protected. May this civic commemoration of the Holocaust forge a united resolve among us never to forget the tears and sufferings of the past and a united resolve to protect the dignity and sanctity of every person and to protect the rights given to every person by our Creator.
Thanks so much, Bishop Gaynor, for those very important words. When our faith communities join together in common purpose, our voices become all the more powerful. Before I introduce our final speaker, please allow me to acknowledge the presence of other public officials who have joined us today for this ceremony. Representative Danilo Burgos, Representative Mary Isaacson, Representative Ben Sanchez, Representative Aaron Kaufer, Representative Tom Welby, Representative Mark Gillen, Representative Mike Carroll, Representative Mike Zabel, Representative Ed Nelson, Representative Jared Solomon, Representative Greg Rothman, and Representative David Zimmerman. Thank you all for being here. I now call on Riley Barassa, a student at the Crossroads Middle School in Lewisberry, Pennsylvania, to read the winning essay from this year's Schwab Holocaust Essay Contest. Riley?
We have numerous problems in our society. We all know it, but everyone pretends that we don't. I learned multiple life lessons during my time in religious school. However, one of the most important life lessons from the Holocaust was if left unchecked and or forgotten, history repeats itself. Another important life lesson that I learned was that intolerance and hatred were the foundations of many reasonings behind mass genocides, and we can trace these learned negative traits throughout history and can see them in current times. What played a role in the events that led up to the Holocaust? What I learned from the innovative program that combined all the 7th graders in the religious schools in my area called Shemor V'Zachor was that anti-Semitism and a lack of sympathy to others was the base of this horrible atrocity. Hatred of Jews, people's disinterest in problems affecting those other than themselves, and general apathy towards their fellow compatriots was also pervasive all over Europe. While visiting the Holocaust Museum, I learned that when Hitler initially gained his control over Germany in 1933, the Nazis had not yet started their mass genocide of the Jews. Hitler planted the seed of hate and sowed it to allow the Nazis to use their government power over the citizens of Germany to start the segregation, intimidation, aggregation, and ultimate exclusion of Jews. Through my religious school education and at the Holocaust Museum, I learned that between 1941 and 1945, these acts culminated into a plan that Nazi leaders referred to as the final solution to the Jewish question. This is now known as the final solution, which killed over 6 million Jews and an additional 5 million Jews, non-Jews, over 11 million people total. But why did the Nazis mainly target Jews? The Nazis targeted Jews because Nazis believed that Jews were the cause for all of Germany's problems, and this started a long time before Hitler came to power. The Nazis spread propaganda which blamed Jews for causing Germany's many financial, societal, and political problems. Jews were also used as scapegoats as the reason why Germany lost World War I and were blamed for the Great Depression. 75 years after the Holocaust, anti-Semitism is still very real and openly expressed in our country, with no repercussions. This shows me that history has begun to repeat itself. Protest signs reading "Jews to the gas," "Jews control America," "Hitler should have finished the job" are now commonplace. T-shirts that advertise Camp Auschwitz, political signs are written saying "Jews we lose," being told by another child in my 7th grade middle school class that at least I'm not Jewish, are all indications that anti-Semitism had not gone away. It was just in hiding for a few decades. I've seen parallels between the genocide of the Jews, the Tutsi of Rwanda, indigenous Americans, Bosnian Muslims, and unfortunately many more. People need to realize that these ethnic groups are humans just like them and can expect their beliefs and customs just like everybody else. It is important to continue to learn and teach about the Holocaust because keeping our history relevant will hopefully keep this horrible tragedy from happening again. This is the other important life lesson that I learned through my Holocaust education. The belief that kindness, tolerance, love, and understanding to others is the key to peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Riley, for your thoughtful words and insight. As we come to the end of our program, I want to thank all of our speakers and everyone in the audience for supporting this important program. And a special thank you to PJC Executive Director Hank Butler, who really is the face of the PJC. As well as Committee Chair Judith Cranus and all other board members of the PJC who have worked tirelessly to put on this program. Now we conclude our program with a musical selection from the Holocaust to be performed by violinist Ben Smithers, a student at Susquehanna Township Middle School, who I understand is himself a fourth-generation survivor. Could you tell us the name of your great-grandparent who was a survivor? Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's all hear from Ben. Thanks so much, Ben. That was really amazing. The song that Ben played is called Song niet keinmal, a Yiddish song known as the Partisan Song, and the translation of those lyrics, the Yiddish lyrics, is set forth in the back of your program. So I thank you all for coming. In the year to come, let us pray for peace and support the dignity, health, and humanity of all people, both here and overseas. And please, let's treat each other with kindness and compassion. Thank you again.
historical atrocity. Hatred of Jews, people's disinterest in problems affecting those other than themselves, and general apathy towards their fellow compatriots.
God. To harm or destroy a human being, then, is to harm or to destroy God. The rabbis say that
The past several years have been marked with an increase of ethnic, racial, and religious hatred, including actions aimed at the Asian Americans. Lessons has never been more clear. We're grateful to share today's ceremony with survivors of the Holocaust, as well as their children, other victims from that dark period of history, and resolve to ensure that such tragedy never occurs again.
by the Nazis in concentration camps and gas chambers, disabled people, LGBTQ people, people of color, political dissidents. That's 11 million worlds destroyed. And of course, in every way. The German Jew, Dr. Emil Fackenheim, wrote that Jews must add a 600 and almost half of the total Jewish population. The life that was wiped out was not just breath at Holocaust Remembrance Day, not only to remember Jewish death, but to support Jewish life, to give legal and financial.
In memorial, we honor that heartbreaking, indescribable loss. And we remind ourselves again and again and again that this extraordinary, and it's only through the actions of ordinary people that we can prevent future atrocity. As the rabbi said, we have to serve the living. To help synagogues and other nonprofit organizations improve their facilities' security and to protect against hate crimes. I have also instructed the Pennsylvania State Police and other members of my administration to join.
I can't help but think about millions of the Ukrainians who today are making their own enormous sacrifices to try and keep their families together. We are blessed to be here today. Are so very important. Moments that define history continue to impact how the world operates today. It does not matter what your religion, what happened. We can keep their spirits alive in how we live and how we treat one another. Each of us has far more in common than any of the things that makes us different.
The fact that I have a thriving Jewish family, including my granddaughter, Rabbi Cutler, and one great grandson. Thank you.
This form of religion was one that was often laced with suffering. It infused my religious upbringing with an undercurrent of sadness and a near constant looking over your shoulder, giving them joy on to the next generations. I've suffered from some form of depression or anxiety disorders for most of my life, and there were moments where this family trauma absolutely reared.
Entire families devastated, men, women, and children tortured and exterminated. Such evil is almost to never stop teaching of these horrors. It is said that if you ignore history, then you are doomed to repeat it. May God.
In 1933, the Nazis had not yet started their mass genocide of the Jews. Hitler planted the seed of hate and sowed it to allow the Nazis to use their government power over the citizens of Germany to start the segregation, intimidation, aggression in our country, with no repercussions. This showed me that history has begun to repeat itself. Protests, signs reading Jews to the gas, Jews control America, Hitler should have finished the job are now commonplace. T-shirts that advertise Camp Auschwitz, political signs over saying Jews will lose, Palestinian Muslims, and unfortunately many more. People need to realize that these ethnic groups are humans just like them and can expect their beliefs and customs just like everybody else. It is important to